Welcome everyone. My name is Greg Ferris, the founder of MyoBrain. Thank you for checking out this video. This is going to be a tracking food 101. So if you've never tracked your food before from scratch, we're going to go over all the steps today. If you have tracked your food, this will be a great video to watch just to kind of make sure we know how to do things properly. We'll talk about all different scenarios of how to track food, starting off with type 1. So type 1 foods will be the most easiest one to track. I have a couple examples here. These would be things that are like pre-portioned for you. So think of English muffins. Think of an egg. It's just one egg. Or if you get a single serving of cottage cheese or a single serving of Greek yogurt. This is very simple to track. I'm going to be using on the demo, it's going to be on the different side of the screen, MyFitnessPal, along exactly how this works. One of the coolest things with an app like MyFitnessPal is you can use the barcode scanner. So anytime you look on a food item, as you check out the grocery store, there's a barcode on it. So I'll simply go into my MyFitnessPal. I'm going to track this as a snack. You'll see me on the side of the screen, go scan with the barcode. I will simply scan this and it should pop up. You may have to kind of double check that it's the proper one, but like 95% of the time, it's going to be accurate. So if I have this whole container, I just click check and now I've tracked that food. The same thing can happen with something like an English muffin. So this obviously is, we call it a type 1 food, pre-portioned, very easy to check. Okay, now moving on to type 2 foods. These are going to be foods that come in large packages that you will determine how much of them you have. So as opposed to having one English muffin, you may have 40 grams of oatmeal or 80 grams of oatmeal. This will certainly be the most common way that you track and monitor food. Things like oatmeal, rice, chicken breasts, really any meat, peanut butter. These are all critical things to make sure you use a food scale for. That way we're getting a proper estimation of them. We will have our recommended food scales. You can find them pretty much anywhere though, Walmart, Target, Amazon. They're very, very cheap. There's no reason to not use a food scale. And we highly recommend in your first couple of months using a food scale, getting familiar with it. It's the best way to truly learn portion sizes. You can eyeball a little bit more long-term. We recommend taking some time before you get there. Okay, so you can do this in one of two ways. You can, once again, can use the barcode scanner just like you would, or I'm going to show you a different way to do this where you can just search the food item on something like MyFitnessPal. So if I want to use white rice, I may type in here, white rice, cooked. That's important to designate that it's cooked. And then I'll type in gram. Remember, we always want to track our foods in either grams or ounces. That is the weight of the food. We do not want to use things like tablespoons and cups. It is similar, but it's not going to be as accurate. So always grams or ounces. If you're in doubt, look on the back of the package. For example, this oatmeal says 40 grams. Track that in grams. So you'll see on the screen here, I have found my white rice cooked. I will click on that. The default serving size actually says 1 cup. I can click on it and you'll see me change this to, there's actually not a gram option on here. So let me go back. I see a different option on here, white rice gram. Changing this here and I'm going to type in 200 grams. Okay, so bam, you can also track it that way. Again, the good rule of thumb is meats will be in ounces. Everything else will likely be in grams. And if you're ever in a pinch, always just recommend going with it on the actual label. The second part of this that kind of fits in the same vein will be condiments. This is a very common question. Hey, should we be tracking condiments? Which ones are worth it or not? You'll have to use somewhat of your intuition and some common sense here. The good rule of thumb, things like hot sauces and salsas, you probably don't need to track. If you look on the back of common hot sauces like this, there's 5 calories in a tablespoon. I would have to eat like this entire bottle at a meal for it really to make a difference. So if I'm having Cholula, something like this, Frank's hot sauce, those things you really don't need to track. But things like ketchup, things like barbecue sauce, Anything that's more of a fat-based product like avocado, mayo, those things should be tracked. For example, if I look at this more Korean barbecue sauce, this has 150 calories per serving. So whatever that is, 145 calorie difference between these two sauces. So obviously a lot of sugar and things like this, barbecue sauces, etc., we will need to account for. So for, again, condiments that are more like salsa, hot sauce based, don't worry about tracking it. For things that are dense in calories, we would want you to track that to best of your ability. It doesn't have to be perfect, but say tracking a serving for a meal is a perfectly fine thing to do. Okay, now move on to type 3 foods. These will be tracking foods that actually have no label on them. So say if you go to the farmer's market and you buy some blueberries, there's not going to be anything for you to scan on there. So these will be things I have down, bananas, oranges, bell peppers. The nice thing about this is these aren't very high in calories anyways. So if you make a small mistake here or there, it's not the end of the world. But let me go back to my bell pepper example. Again, I will just search the term bell pepper in my FitnessPal. There's a green check mark. Let's say I'm gonna have a green bell pepper. Cool, I'm gonna click on that. Let me try to change the serving to 1 small. If you look on my screen, it says 15 calories in a small green bell pepper. So I'll track that on there. I can add it to my breakfast, add it to my meal. But once again, this is not really gonna make or break you. So fruits are a little bit more high in calories than vegetables. So I would recommend to, again, weigh those out a bit more diligently. So again, if you have a big thing of blueberries, of course, you can just use your food scale, do 100 grams, track that, and move on. But the critical thing here is the accuracy you need with something like a fruit or a vegetable is much lower. Take peanut butter for an example. And let me pull this up on the screen. So if we do peanut butter and we try to eyeball peanut butter, let's say if I track peanut butter and I say, I think I had 20 grams. If you look on the screen, that looks like it was 119 calories for me if I have 20 grams. But again, let's say I eyeballed it and it actually wasn't 20 grams. So it actually was 40 grams. And visually, that's not that big of a difference. And I'm telling you, the visual representation of 20 grams or 40 grams of peanut butter is very, very small. Versus if you do maybe 50 grams of blueberries, let's do this. So 50 grams of blueberries has about 30 calories. Let's say you were, again, 100% off on that estimation and you actually had 100 grams, that's now 60 calories, right? So the repercussions of being wrong with peanut butter is much greater than being wrong with a blueberry, right? So this makes it a little bit less stressful with type 3 foods. Fruits and vegetables, we will want to track them, but ultimately, if your goal is to lose weight, if you're trying to track our food accurately, it's probably not going to be the case that we overate fruits and vegetables. Okay, moving on to type 4 now. The main emphasis of this video will be discussing type 4 and type 5. So type 4 foods will be tracking meals out of the home, things like fast food and restaurant meals. So say if you go to Chick-fil-A, Chipotle, McDonald's, again, the really nice thing about our apps that we're using to Chick-fil-A, and I want to get some chicken minis, you can simply type in Chick-fil-A minis, and I'm sure it'll pop up. Bam, it's a green check mark. Maybe I've had it before. So I can have a 4-count chicken mini and track it. So if you're eating at a more of a chain style restaurant, it should be pretty easy to monitor these things, right? You'll find out pretty quickly that chicken minis, even a small one, is 370 calories. And again, this is why tracking our food could be so powerful. Now, a common question we may get is, okay, what if I'm not going to Chick-fil-A? I'm going to like my local kind of chicken spot. Well, you're not going to be able to search that on my FitnessPal, and they're not going to have their nutrition information posted there, but you can just do your best guess. So if you're going to your brunch place, your local brunch spot, you can track that as IHOP and do the equivalent food. If you got an omelet at your local spot, track it as an omelet at IHOP. Of course, it's going to be somewhat inaccurate there, but unless you're eating out with a really high frequency, which of course should not be the goal for us, we're trying to eat well consistently, but unless we're having a really high frequency, eating out may only account for maybe 5 or 10% of our meals. So if we're a little bit off here or there, it's not the end of the world. So again, to review here on type 4, for more chain style, look for the actual food on MyFitnessPal or the equivalent. And if it's not a chain, think of a chain that's like that. If it's a brunch spot, think of IHOP. If it's a burger place, think of Ruby Tuesdays. If it's a steakhouse, think of Outback Steakhouse. And we also have eating out guides of some of the best things to eat at these spots and some of the worst things to eat. You can find that in our Thinkific course and also in the MyoBrain Circle. Okay, and wrapping things up here with now our type 5 category. This will be food you're eating away from home, but not necessarily meals that are eaten out. For example, if your grandma asks you to come over and makes you some lasagna, how do you track those things? They're mixed ingredients. You don't know what kind of tomato sauce they made, what kind of beef they made. How do you account for that? Well, again, similar philosophy with our type 4 categories. We don't need to be perfect here. Number one, we want to track this to be somewhat accurate, just to hold ourselves accountable. We know if we put it on the scoreboard, we're going to eat a lot better than if we just eat it and pretend it didn't happen. You're going to find out really quickly when you track your food, more than anything else, portion sizes matter. So whether your grandma used 80-20 ground beef or 96-4 ground beef may not move the needle a ton. It's going to be, did you have this much ground beef or did you have that much? So again, us just being in the mindset of being able to think about portion sizes will be helpful. Just type in homemade meatloaf and see what I can find. I have one that's 262 calories, one that's 201, one that's 230, 290. I would personally pick something in the middle. So I see something in the low 200s, I see something in the 300s. I'm gonna type in the 262. I'm not gonna think about it that much. I'm gonna track it and move on. If I go back for seconds, I'll track it as 2 servings here. So again, these meals, type 4, eating out at restaurants, fast food, and type 5, eating kind of out with friends and family, are probably only making up 5 or 10% of our meals. So if we get the other 90% correct, unless we have a disastrous time at a couple of those meals, it's probably not going to be enough to move the needle. So we're trying to get close enough, kind of a low friction way for us to still track that meal, but not to be overly stressed out about it. We do recommend for clients in the first couple of months to be trying to track every single meal that you're eating with pretty high accuracy. But over time, we found that people can be more flexible. We actually have a separate video. We talk about stress-free tracking meals out. I won't go through that video, but again, it's in our Thinkific course, and I'll also link it down in the comments of this YouTube video. Okay, and a few special considerations when it comes to type 4 and type 5 style of meals. The first consideration here is really important in your first couple of months to pre-log these meals. What do I mean by that? Most of the time, we're gonna go enjoy a meal with friends and family, eat out. It's predetermined. It's a Friday night. It's a Sunday afternoon. We know it's gonna be the case. So we actually can go into our MyFitnessPal or the equivalent, think of something that's gonna be roughly on the menu and pre-track it. You're essentially putting that there as a placeholder, and again, that keeps you accountable that it's gonna be in your day already. What that really allows you to do as well is adjust your meals around it. So more often than not, if you're gonna go out to a steak dinner with some friends and get a steak and a beer, that's gonna be a higher calorie dinner than you would typically have on a Tuesday evening. So if you just eat normally all the way up into that meal, it's gonna be a problem for you to kind of eat that meal, not feel super restrictive, and still hit your targets, especially if your calories are low and you're trying to lose body fat. So by pre-logging that meal, it kind of forces us to eat a little bit less, in this instance at breakfast, at lunch, to make room for that overall meal. I want you to think about when we are eating out and having less control of some meals within that day to create a buffer on the meals you do have control for. We talked about pre-logging that meal and now how that can set the table. And if that's the case, say if I'm trying to eat 2,200 calories, and on a typical day, I may have 400 or 500 calories for breakfast. And that helps me pace out my calories for the entire day. But now if I'm gonna go have a much, much bigger dinner, I may remove breakfast entirely, right? So the point here is, if you're gonna go and eat out, your meal frequency, your meal size, your choices may be a lot different than you would, again, on a normal Tuesday. That's perfectly okay. It's okay to be more restrictive on those meals if we're going to go eat out, because you'll be more flexible on that meal out. You're just thinking of your daily budget of calories and adjusting accordingly. As the final way you can kind of create a safety net and a buffer for days that you eat out is to shoot for the lower end of your calorie range. So again, let's use the example of 2,200 calories. Say your coach wants you to eat between 21 and 2,300. Well, if I'm gonna go eat out that day, I'll probably just shoot for 2,100 for the entire day. That way, if I underestimated my food, if the cook threw some extra olive oil on the chicken, I'm gonna build in that buffer, okay? So again, we know, we actually released a video a couple of years ago, the average calorie content of a restaurant meal is 1,200 calories. There was a study done, they measured over 300 restaurants. Again, the average meal was 1,200 calories. That's not including appetizers, that's not including alcohol. So we know that people can easily eat 50 to 75% of their total daily calorie needs in one sitting. There's no easy way to put this. Eating out is a very, very tough thing to do and simultaneously control calories. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it means you do have to build in some safety nets like lower end of your calorie ranges, more restriction throughout the day, and making sure we pre-plan that. If we do those things, we'll give ourselves a fighting chance to track our food and still stay on target. Again, our focus point for clients is not to take away all the fun and all the joy of eating food. We want you to be able to sustain this for a month, for a year, for 10 years, and sustain these behaviors. We're not trying to tell people to never eat out, but we do have to do it more diligently if we want to be successful with our overall nutrition journey. All right, so that's our not so quick summary on how to track your food from scratch based upon all the types. To quickly go through all the types once again, type 1 will be pre-portioned foods, eggs, English muffin, very easy to track these things. Type 2 will be larger containers like chicken, oatmeal, rice. Make sure we're tracking these things with a food scale for accuracy using grams and ounces. Type 3 will be things without food labels, strawberries, blueberries, oranges. Same exact thing, do your best to track them with a food scale with grams and ounces, but also remember things like these are not super high in calories, so the room for error is much larger than things like peanut butter and rice, which have a much tighter room for error there. Type 4 would be more chain style restaurants or just eating out in general. Remember, we still want to guesstimate the best that we can and move on. Don't be overly stressed about it. And also remember to pre-track that meal, especially in your first couple of months. And type 5 will be more homemade meals. Your grandma makes you something, your friend brings over some chili, how you still can estimate that meal. But again, remember, those meals should probably only make up about 5 or 10% of our overall day, so it really shouldn't impact us too much in the long term. That is the video. Welcome to MyoBrain, and hopefully this was helpful.